What is going on? I want to welcome you from F Court for today, Monday, April 24th, 2023. I am your host, Sean Murphy, and it is good to be back making content again, talking about the Detroit Pistons, their upcoming offseason, the coaching search, who could potentially be the next coach of the Detroit Pistons, and also what this means for them going forward. Let's talk about all that. But first, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel so you're not missing any coverage about the Pistons or the NBA as a whole. I appreciate each and every one of you and all the support you gave me on social media for missing this time over the last couple of weeks. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video. But first, let's talk about hoops. The Detroit Pistons, according to James Edwards III, have three candidates at the top of their list at this current point of the coaching search, and that is Bucks assistant Charles Lee, who is what he was touted as one of the top coaching candidates available in the pool. He is a young, prominent assistant under coach Mike Budenholzer. He's been under him for about 9 years now, ever since being in Atlanta. And this is a guy who people talk about very highly. If you listen to him, has a lot of charisma, has a lot of care about relationships and helping players develop and seeing them succeed. He seems like a very bright, intelligent candidate. Certainly a very good reason why Vegas put him as the top odds to be the next head coach of the Detroit Pistons, but also a guy who has come to the process and apparently has blown the Pistons away through his interview process, but also has been a guy that has been long touted as a future NBA head coach is Jaron Collins, who is a former Warriors assistant, but also currently works on the New Orleans Pelicans staff. And this is a guy who is touted as the defensive coordinator of the Warriors dynasty. And listen, he's a former player. He's a guy that, if you listen to him talk as well, is very intelligent. He went to Stanford. He's a guy that understands the game of basketball, understands, how to build relationships. He's a guy on Willie Green's staff who's clearly been very impactful there as well. So I think he's definitely someone that's come in and blown the Pistons away. And I certainly would not complain if he was the next head coach of the Pistons either. But then there's also former overtime elite coach Kevin Ali, who, if you go and listen and find clips of him as well, he is another guy who can speak with conviction, is a leader, is a guy that a lot of the players in overtime elite just loved and admired, and is a guy that has been long touted as an NBA coaching candidate as well. I know there's a lot of people that, look at the situation that happened with Connecticut, but, if you actually look, he actually won a lawsuit that he had for a wrongful firing, and Connecticut actually had to pay him a settlement. So if you look at the context of that situation as well, I think Nick Henkel does a great job of laying that out on the Bun and Cardigan podcast. So go check that out, their latest episode. Shout out to the boys. And, I think overall, if you look at the direction and what, these guys have in common, first of all three coaches are youthful. This would be their first ever head coaching position in the NBA, which, is pretty significant that is a decision that the Pistons are making. But I think it fits the roster that they have as well. A youthful up and coming roster, a youthful up and coming coach that has been a part of programs that have won championships. I mean, Kevin Ali won the national championship at UConn. We even have, in addition to having charisma, these guys have championship experience. I mean, Kevin Ali won a national championship with the UConn Huskies. Jaron Collins, obviously being a part of the Warriors, he has some rings in his collection. And then you even look at Charles Lee. He's part of the Milwaukee Bucks staff. He won a ring with them a couple years ago. So these guys all have been a part of programs that know what it takes to win a championship, but also have done it off of discipline, development, and defense, which is exactly what Troy Weaver said he was looking for in the next head coach of the Detroit Pistons. But also, you talk about the fact that you have a guy like Dwayne Casey, but also John Beeline within your ranks to help and, mentor this coach and walk them along this process. I think whichever coach does take on this position is going to be in a tremendous position to ultimately succeed because of the resources that they're going to have available. And the fact that these are the guys that, are on their list speaks highly about where the Pistons are at, because according to an Athletic article, laying out these candidates, which, by the way, go subscribe to the Athletic, not sponsored, but, just really good content over there. It lays out the fact that, executives believe that this position is the best position available in the NBA. According to the Athletic, they've spoken to executives throughout the NBA, and they've said this is the best position available. And obviously, the Toronto Raptors now have a coaching position available as well, which in my opinion, if you were to rank all the coaching positions available, I would say probably now that Toronto one is number one if you're a coach that's looking to win now, which, speaking of, Ime Udoka, I know, is seen as the top coach on the market alongside Nick Nurse as well. But Ime Udoka is reportedly linked with the Toronto Raptors, and I think that's ultimately where he's going to end up. For one, because if you look at the construction of that roster, the philosophy of, Asai Ujiri, he's a guy that is looking just to win at all times. And even though there's conversations and he's probably going to be offered a lot of money to potentially go to Washington and help the Wizards, I just don't see that ultimately being where he ends up. By the way, I could actually see Bob Myers potentially leaving the Warriors and going to Washington. I think that's a potential underrated scenario. But anyway, with the Toronto Raptors specifically, they're trying to win now. They have pieces of and prominent, proven veterans, and they want a guy who can come in and demand a locker room. And I think Ime Udoka fits that bill perfectly. I think, Ime Udoka is going to command, a higher salary, but also I think if you look at the situation that the Pistons are in, we talked about this, a couple weeks ago on the podcast. The Pistons had dealt with the Rob Murphy situation at the beginning of this season, which we don't have to rehash. But the reality of it is to have, to bring a candidate in who has also dealt with that type of situation at just about the same time of the year. I just don't think, optically it's a great look. I don't think it's something that, the Pistons are, particularly looking to, like get into, but also I don't think it's something that they necessarily need to. And that staff didn't just have Ime Udoka. They had two prominent guys who are now head coaches themselves in Will Hardy and Joe Mazzulla. So I think, if you look at Ime Udoka's resume, yes, it's strong. Getting to the finals year one, I think that's ultimately going to, bring him to a roster that is more constructed to win now. But also, again, with some of those other things that the Pistons are dealing with and the situations they have internally, it just doesn't make Ime a great fit for them at this time either. Even though he was someone that they talked to at one point when they were, interviewing with Dwane Casey, I think now there is just a great prominent pool of candidates who can come in and help this team immediately and help this team grow. And I think all three of these guys would be more than capable of leading this team into the future. And if you listen to all three of them talk, if you watch, their demeanor, they're all just guys that can relate to players who are relationally strong, who understand the game of basketball, who knows what it takes to win. And that's exactly what we need within this organization. And the last time the Pistons have hired a first-time head coach was John Kuester back in 2009 after, hiring another one in Michael Curry. And we all know how all those situations went. But with this time, it's different because not only are you not bringing in guys that were, internally on that staff, which granted, don't get me wrong, that championship staff was a great staff. It's just at the same time, when you're bringing out candidates who are touted as top coaching candidates in the league, these are guys that a lot of executives believe in. These are top assistants in the NBA, guys who are credited for doing a lot of things for other, for significant players in their careers. I think if you look at this list, I think it's a strong one. You don't know the results of the playoffs. You have no idea what the outcome is. And potentially there's candidates who could become available that you had no idea would be. But however, I don't see that happening. And quite frankly, I don't see any of those potential, wild card candidates being a fit for this team. And then, I know a lot of people as well were saying Nick Nurse, Detroit, Dwane Casey connection. No. If you listen to if you've looked at the rumors and all the reports and the trails for about a month now, Nick Nurse has been heavily linked to Houston ever since, about March. And, when that's happening with a coach who's still currently coaching a team, that's not a great sign. But also, if you looked at the tea leaves and a lot of the reports about Nick Nurse within Toronto, it sounds like he wasn't the most beloved coach by the players either. I mean, all indications are he lost that locker room this past year. And so it just doesn't seem like he would be an option either. And quite frankly, I don't know how much Dwane Casey would love the idea of the guy who replaced him come in and replace him again in Detroit. I just, no, no. For the casual fan, it's easy to look at the proven names that are out there in the candidate pool, guys like Kenny Atkinson, guys like Ime Udoka, guys like Nick Nurse, and say these are the guys we need to bring in because of the resumes that they have. But at the same time, if you look at the trend of hiring first-time head coaches, young guys who don't have that experience, it actually has been working out really well. In fact, if you look at the top 5 youngest coaches in the NBA right now, some of these guys are already considered to be some of the best coaches in the league. Just to name a few, we have Will Hardy in Utah, 34 years old. Will Hardy is considered to be a freaking basketball genius. He's helped Utah overachieve tremendously when they were supposed to be in the Wemby sweepstakes. He really has revitalized Lauri Markkanen's career and made him into a solid number 1 option. Will Hardy's definitely one of the best coaches in the league. You look at Joe Mazzulla and everything he's done with the Boston Celtics, despite everything that happened with the Ime Udoka situation at the beginning of the season, Joe Mazzulla was still able to really help this team be at the top of the conference. And, the first month of his reign, quite frankly, they were dominating the league. So Joe Mazzulla has also been solid. You look at Mark Daigneault in Oklahoma City. He's been a tremendous coach as well, helping guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams. Overall, he's been tremendous in Oklahoma City as well, getting them to the play-in tournament. And, quite frankly, another guy that proves the point of great young coaches. You also look at Taylor Jenkins in Memphis. Would any of you complain if he was the coach of the Pistons? Hell no. Would any of you blame any of the struggles that are happening in Memphis on Taylor Jenkins? Hell no. Except maybe don't let Dylan Brooks shoot the ball 13 times in a half or in a playoff game or ever. That would maybe be my one criticism of Taylor Jenkins, but at the same time, maybe that's not entirely in his control, but also one of the best coaches in the league. And then 5th is Willie Green in New Orleans, who is being touted as one of the best young coaches in the NBA as well, a guy that I personally love. I love too. I mean, quite frankly, he helped breathe life into that roster when they were dealing with a lot of the struggles and the trials and tribulations with Zion Williamson and his injury. So, overall, it's proven that you can have a lot of success with bringing in young coaches. And you look at the reality that the guys that are available and the guys that, we are interviewing have been a part of success, have a lot of mentors and people that, have been very successful, and whether you go from the Budenholzer coaching tree, whether you go from the Steve Kerr coaching tree, or whether you go with Kevin Ali, all of these guys have been a part of programs, been a part of cultures, been a part of defensive powerhouses. And if that's something that they can help the Pistons build, obviously I'm all for it. And so with that, obviously, I think the head coaching search is a very difficult thing to talk about and analyze, just because the reality of it is it's difficult to decipher what each and every one of these guys do within these programs, who these guys are like on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, with assistant coaches, there's limited, footage available as far as interviews and as far as conversations. But, the ones I've found of these guys, I think very highly of. And even the clips of Kevin Ali, which, by the way, is how hard it was to find clips of Kevin Ali. But man, I recommend going and looking up some Kevin Ali speeches, because that man just can just grasp a room. I can see why he's one of the top 3 candidates of this position, 100%. And so with that, I would definitely love to have a conversation in the comment section down below about this coaching search, what you guys think ultimately should happen there. Would you like to see some of the assistant coaches from this Pistons organization stay on, guys like Rashard Lewis? I personally would love to see stay within the staff. I would love to know your thoughts in the conversation down below. I also know that you're going to say, let's get Sheed on this staff. And personally, I mean, listen, if one of those guys wants to bring in Sheed, I am all for it, but I'm not going to force it at the same time. But with that, folks, I thank you all so much for the support. Seriously, again, I apologize for the lack of content over the last couple of weeks. My mental health is just not where it's needed to be. I work a lot. I work technically 3 jobs between my day job, my content job, and then I also work at a bowling alley on the weekends. So my mental health is just taking a toll from just a lot of the work. This season obviously did not go how it intended to go. There's a lot of things personally and professionally that were very turbulent, but at the same time, I'm just grateful for the audience that we have here from Half Court, Jeff and Troy, and all my friends and family, the people that help support. Mental health is a very real thing. I'm clinically diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and have you know um suspicions of bipolar 2, which is, bipolar 1 is when you have more, kind of like those episodes, but bipolar 2 is when your energy can kind of have ebbs and flows, and times where you can feel great and on top of the world, and times where you just want to be in bed at all times. And just battling a lot of those, like battling a lot of those things, and going through a lot of that, while at the same time covering my first basketball season professionally is has been a lot. But a lot of the things that have gotten me through it are seeing the comments of people saying that it helps them get through their workday, or helps them, like, like bring excitement to this team, because it helps bring me excitement to get back doing this too. And you guys mean a lot to me. I'm grateful that I get to make videos and talk about basketball with you guys, and thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, I appreciate you, and I'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.